was Mensah. He was a professor here before York University coached him several years ago. Yeah. So he's come back to the base, actually, and he also wrote the book. He's written a number of books, and this is his latest. So we'll be talking about our books. I don't know if anybody knows Kwame Ampadu, a musician in Ghana. He sang a song, one of the songs, which was quite popular, and the title of the song is Ebitiye, Ebisumtiye Kra, which translates to English as some are well seated and others are not so well seated. Some are privileged, some are oppressed. And the lyrics of the song go something like this. There was a meeting of the animal kingdom, and the antelope had the misfortune of being seated in front of the lion. Now the lion not only pinned the tail of the antelope to the ground, but also was hitting the antelope in the head each time the antelope wanted to speak. At one point, the antelope mastered courage, and at the top of his voice shouted, to the chair. Say, Chairman, petition please, a point of order. At this meeting, some of us are well seated, well placed. Others are under excruciating oppression. So, can we adjourn the meeting? As it is in the animal kingdom, so it is in society. The tug of war between the oppressed and the oppressor, the powerful and the powerless, has been going on for millennia. And this book talks about this tug of war. I was inspired by 3 social justice advocates. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, injustice anywhere is an assault of justice everywhere. And Mahatma Gandhi, who said, you must be the change you want to see in the world. And Kwame Nkrumah, who wrote in his book Conscientism that thought without practice is blind, and practice without thought is empty. The idea here is that social justice is not only local but also global. It is also dialectical in the sense it is linked. The local is linked with the global. Social justice is also transnational, transcending national boundaries, cultures. Social justice is also intersectional, linking race, in the so-called race, gender, sexuality, age, class, ability, disability, and all that. So for us to understand the issue of social justice holistically, we need to take into consideration all these connections. It's not a very simple thing. And I argue that the solution to the problems that social injustice creates can be found, as it were, in the womb of social injustice. In other words, to get social justice, we have to look at the root causes of social injustice. The two cannot be dichotomized or separated. In the book, I also argue that, in fact, I used a poem that I wrote some time ago, and I'm going to read it to you. It's called The Musings of the Son of the Global Village. I am the son of the global village. I am a complex of complexities in the heart of complexities. I am one and many things, yet I am nothing. I am a hybrid of hybridities, yet I am who I am. Yet still I am of complexities, son of the global village. I've planted my feet firmly in the soil of my motherland and allowed my eyes to roam the global village. I see breathtaking beauty, but also I see ugly scars dotting the global village landscape. I breathe the air of freedom, creativity, self-actualization, yet I gasp in airless oppression. Airless oppression, alienation, and countryside. Yet I savor the air of renewal, replenishment, and revitalization. Yet I gasp in toxicities. I see harvest of plenitude, yet I see harvest of starvingtude, leantude. I see seasons of selfless giving, yet I see cycles of pillage. I am a son of the global village, but whose village? Am I? Akan, Ghana, Ghanaian, African, Canadian, North American, son of whom? Citizen of where? So this speaks to the complexity of social justice. It speaks to the idea that we live in an environment of plenitude, a lot of goodies, and yet the goodies are controlled by a very slender minority of our people. Everywhere, it's not just in North America, every society, unfortunately, those who happen to wield the power or wield the loudspeakers, okay, drown out the voices of those who don't have. Those who have access to, valued, resources, control those resources and deny others and oppress others. So this book seeks to explain all these in both theoretical and substantive ways. And I explore the various theories of social justice, as well as map out, practical ways to solve some of these problems. So basically, that is my book. And I now pass on the baton to my colleague, Professor Joseph Mensah.
Thank you very much, As he said, I was here at Kwantlen, so this is a return to home. First and foremost, I will thank you all for coming. Obviously, the turnout is not, could have been better, so thanks for your sacrifice. This book is more or less a follow-up to the one I wrote earlier on that dealt with Black Canadians. Following that book, I decided to put on record some of the issues to which the white majority or the people of power, they have to pay attention to. In particular, when they considered enacting racism against blacks, the fact that it will turn back and impact on them. So the book is entitled The Boomerang Effect. The Boomerang Ethics. Boomerang, those of you who are familiar or not familiar, is an instrument used by Aboriginals for sports or entertainment. For the most part, among the whites, they use it as a form of entertainment. It is made up of a stick. You throw it, and then it will return back to where it started from. So you throw it, and it comes back to you. So this is a metaphor that I've used to illustrate the extent to which the racism that has been exacted upon blacks will eventually turn back to the whites, and for the most part to society as a whole. I will just use some few illustrations to bring across the point. Let me first start with, say, the case with the criminal justice system. There's a lot of racism going on there. In Toronto, for instance, they do what we call carding. The police can just stop you on the street as a black young person and take your record. not for the fact that you've done anything wrong, but just the fact that he thinks he needs to collect a record of you. This record is inputted in computer, and of course, some employers use it against the blacks. More or less, instead of you having a credential that would be positive, the card turn out to be something like a negative credential against you. Now, if you're a black youth working in Toronto, the police, they have their surveillance, they profile you and all those things. So what has happened in situations like this is the whites know about this. So they would rather carry the guns and the drugs and all those things, knowing very well that the police will not stop them. So if you have a situation where, let me give a thought experiment. You have a black child and a white. They're all going from here to Vancouver. They've all loaded their car with marijuana or whatever. The white will pass through, the black will be caught. Knowing this, if you are a black criminal, you will pass it through your white friend, and all of a sudden, all the drugs will be at Vancouver. So by the time you realize there's more drug than you expect, that is one aspect by which the boomerang will come and affect the whole society. Another way would be the fact that because you are so much profiling the blacks, when they see any crime, obviously they're not going to report it to the police. So that will also come and hit. That will also come and hit the whole society. Blacks may be criminal if you think like as though blacks somehow, because of our color of the skin, we are criminal. Obviously, that is not true. That is not true, but some people believe that. The point is, you discriminate against these black youth so much so that they don't have any job. If they turn to the life of criminal and go to a shopping mall and keep shooting as it happens a lot in Toronto, the gun, the bullet has no limit. It has no boundary. It can hit any white, black, green, or whoever it is. Let's move on to the area of, say the labor market. The extent to which you discriminate against the black person, the employer will notice that and use it against the white worker. Because if you don't do the work, they will realize that the black person is at the door waiting to do the same work. So what the employer will do is basically to use that to reduce the wage of the white person. Because knowing very well that if I pay you 20 and you don't accept it, there's a black person at the door who is prepared to take the $20. So the employer will use that as a divide and rule tactics to undermine the labor union, undermine the solidarity at the workplace, and knock the black against the white and bring the wages down. The same way, we have a situation where we call stereotype threat. Mostly, if you are stereotyped in a workplace, it could be in a sports environment. The more you are stereotyped, the more it becomes difficult for you to perform. In other words, you become so conscious of yourself. You begin to panic, so your performance comes down. So in the workplace, all the insult, all the dirty names, all the stereotype and name calling undermine the productivity of the black person. And of course, by extension, the productivity of the workplace, because most of this workplace is a chain in an industrial setup. What you do affects everybody in the production line. Let me give another example of, say, the same workplace. You discriminate against all the women who cook for you. They are all blacks. They are mostly minorities. You don't give them a good contract. They don't have benefit. Their pay is very low. It is very temporary. If they are sick, they still have to come to work. Let's assume that they are sick. They cannot afford to stay at home. And they come to the workplace. Let's take a case of, say, Kwantlen, and come and cook the food. Who do you think they are spreading their illness to? So by the time you understand that you could not give them the pay to stay at home, they are infecting everybody at the workplace, and the society will have to pay for that. I can extend this argument with so many illustrations, but very often these impacts are hidden. They are not that direct. So the white society with the power to combat racism, they don't see it. So the basic argument in this book is that don't try to solve racism as though you are solving it out of compassion for the black person. It is in your own self-interest to solve it, because it will eventually come back to hurt you. You discriminate against them, none of them have jobs. All the Somali ladies, because of their hijab, they don't have jobs. Of course, you have to end up paying the social welfare, and most of them drive the best class these days. Because the more you have children, the more the government have to pay you. Who is paying them? We are paying them. So in a way, we are all paying for the racism that we impact on society. So that is the thrust of the book. We call it Boomerang Ethics. We are not just describing the impact of racism on black or white, that would be the effect. But we are moving beyond the argument for the effect to talk about morality. What is good and what is bad and how to solve it. Hence the idea of boomerang ethics. So in a nutshell, that is what the book is about. There are so many other examples in the realm of sports, in the realm of education. Let me give you a very funny illustration with education before I end this. If you notice a situation where these days the young people, especially, it started with the blacks as a form of resistance. In the 80s, their belt that they wear with pants was here. By the 90s, it was here. By the 2000s, it was here. In fact, one can argue that by the year 2020, you just put the belt and hook the pant and drag the pant behind you. Okay? They started this as a form of resistance to the way they are being treated in schools. But of course, it's as an impact of contagion. In other words, the white kids have also copied. So it is a negative or it's a form of resistance. They all copy it and it's spread all over the place. So no matter what you do, you may be doing it directly to a person, but the point is we all know that through the law of karma, you bounce a ball, whatever you do, you may not say it directly, but they will all come back and help society. So on that note, I will bring my to the close. Yeah.
All right, so the floor is open for Q&A. We're ready to field any questions you may have.
Yeah.
Right. You have a question, my daughter? Yes.
I want to compliment what you said. You said, some years ago, one of my professors, he was working at the city of New York. And he told me at work that he was part of the committee that designed, he was a planner that designed drugs for the blacks. Mm-hmm. The idea was to feed the blacks with a lot of cheap drugs so that they will be confused and not going to elections, and so that the white can get their way to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And then eventually, what happened? The boomerang. The white started taking drugs, and then, as you know,
now it's a white problem.
Yeah.
So
it's a good illustration.
That is
On your point,
yeah.
Africa is a good big continent. So are other big nations. The United Nations Security Council, made up of 5 nations. And these are the people who are talking about democracy in different countries and even inspecting elections. And knowing very well that the Security Council doesn't represent the world. It's our justice, our injustice.
So the wielders of power, the global resources, you dictate to everybody else. And that is true.
I have another one too. Because, like, here in Vancouver, especially in Surrey, there are lots of guns around.
Yeah.
Like, junkies fighting against themselves and shooting each other because of power,
Right.
because of power, because I know we don't live too far from a high school, and what I heard is the school, there's always groups, right?
Yeah.
This is white, this is Indian, this is black, this is Somalian. And so if you don't belong to one of those groups, then you are an outcast.
Yeah.
So what it is children form these groups
Yeah.
and fight against themselves and kill.
Yeah.
So that means, to me, it's not boomerang as you are telling it to be. It goes against the family that has spent a lot of time to bring their children to a higher education. So to me, I think no matter what it is, you have to leave those things behind and concentrate on your education to be a better person. We have to solve that problem for our young ones, especially we Africans, and our children are here trying to learn, and instead of learning the good part of it, they go to the bad part and become a victim of. That's how I call it, to be a victim instead. Can you explain?
Yeah, the school environment, as you've just described, you have to remember too, there are schools that you will not find it like that. Okay, it depends on the resources, the attention that you're giving to the student. In fact, the place that you are talking about is very likely, if you look at per capita, they don't have resources. The students that are there will not find any role model. If it's a minority school, they don't have minority prof, they don't have, the teachers actually look down upon them and all those things. So it somehow feed into that. So you find that environment so tense. The idea of education is basically at the back burner. It's not taken so seriously. When you go to a different environment, different schools, they have their resources, the attention is there. In fact, the education curricula reflect them, they see themselves in what they are learning, so they pay attention. So most of these things has a lot to do with how society partition resources, whose idea become what is taught at a school level. Okay, so in a way there is a Buram aspect to that, because those schools have not been taken care of, but of course all those things that are happening will not be contained in that environment. Okay, let's say all the blacks are not going to school and all those things. Who is going to pay for the burden of that in terms of their own reduction in productivity, their own criminality at the end of it, their own, most of it is going to burden society. So what I'm trying to say is that if you don't pay attention to them because they are minorities or whatever, at the end of it all, it will all come back to you. Yeah.
I have a question. Actually, both of you, in your books, I'm wondering if you talk about, or you go to the extent of discussing the effects of, let's say, the boomerang and also the social justice. Whether you talk about, you related to the economy, how it affects the economy. Do you talk about that?
Yes, certainly, yes. For example, I argued, today there was this announcement by the Minister for, what is this minister again? The federal minister. She announced that the government is going to pay, I think, 800 million for the victims of the 60s school. That is native children who were taken away from their families. And then I was saying, you ask the government, you see problems, cropping up everywhere, and they keep saying there is no money, no money, no money, no money. But where did they find this money at this time? The money is there. Exactly, the money is there. And I also argue that Canada has enough resources to create jobs for practically everybody who is able and wants to work. But because of the inequities in the distribution of resources, and also because of the moral imperatives of those who are in power, who don't care so much, about the powerless. That is why we have all these, these problems. The problems can be resolved, can be solved if governments have the will to do so. Canada can create a full employment society if the government wants to do that. Everybody who is willing and able to work. They tell you there is no money, but they always find that the money is there. Look, how much money did they spend when they went to bomb Libya? What is his name?
Gaddafi?
Huh?
No.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Harper government, right? Within a few weeks, they spent millions of dollars in bombing, Libya into the dust. They did the same thing in Iraq, the same thing in Libya, and they always complain, no money. But the money is there. So it is the problem lies in the fact that those who are in power, don't really care about the powerless of the government, and that is the economics of it, and I discuss this.
They need to also take into consideration that some of us, the blacks, per se, if I may use that term, we just use as an excuse and do not try to pursue our own better future.
Yeah.
Like we just, I think society had just made it such that, okay, I don't care, yes, I'm going to be impeded anyway, so I'm not going to go anywhere. I'll just stay and collect my, how do you call it, social services, or social benefit or something. And then that's what I think about them too. So I'm wondering if we have anything to talk to that.
I believe that the majority of so-called people of color, I don't like that term because it's assumed that some people have no color. The majority are willing to work, right? But the system is so stacked against them. Joseph mentioned, prejudice and discrimination. It is there. It is everywhere. And so many blacks and people of color try to get jobs. They all want to live well. They all want to contribute. But they try, and when they hit the wall, some just resign. Okay? But the majority are willing. It's only a very small number of people of color who do not want to work and want to, feed off.
That's actually true.
Yeah, parasite on the system. But the majority are willing and ready to work, but the system is simply stacked against them. Yes.
Dr. Quist, I'm just wondering, racism, is it a learned behavior? If it's a learned behavior, is it preventable? Just wondering, is it learned?
Of course, racism is a social construct. It's learned. There's no one is born. Yeah, no one is born to be a racist.
But is it preventable?
Yes, if anything that is a social construct can be unconstructed, as it were, it can be prevented. All right, but those at the top, the willingness, the lack of, the will, the readiness to address the problem is the case. Because of course, those who are in power are, the leaders of the dominant society. Okay, and their logic is that, our people must, get the jobs. They will not say it openly, but it's systemic. System is built into the system. And so, from generation to generation, we find that the system is stacked in favor of the people who are in power, and their descendants, or their people, their relatives and all that. So that is the whole thing. It's systemic and systematically built into the institutions. Like, if you went to the bank to go and look for a loan as a person of color, the person of color, maybe the person who is giving the loan is also a person of color, all right? But the person has to go, follow certain rules to give the loan. And the rules there are already stacked against people of color. So your friend, your colleague, your fellow black person will end up denying you the loan, all right? Denying you the loan simply following other rules. So the rule is there, it's systemic, it's built into the system. So he or she can see you as a fellow black person, maybe even empathize and sympathize with you. But the rule says that if you don't have that, you cannot be given the loan. And in most cases, people of color don't have the collateral and then they are denied the loan. So there is
Quite hear your descriptions of your story.
Right.
But based on what everybody's asking and talking about, I'm interested. Well, we have to realize that somehow, from everything you're saying, it seems to be that there is a pre-established framework that the rest of us are not privy to, that the people in charge have to follow to set up the rules and the laws that guide these things. You gave the example of the other person who is like you, who is there to give you a loan and you can't get it because of the rules. Yeah, because the rules are set already and he or she has nothing to do. If they go against it, they lose their job. End of story. And that's it. But where I wanted to go was regarding what my sister here was talking about regarding education. And I was wondering, don't you think that it has a lot to do with the teachers? Maybe a re-education or a new, an updated, upgraded teacher training situations might be a part of the solution. Because what you said, for example, in that school, it doesn't matter. When my father was a teacher, was one of the pioneer teachers where I come from. And what I noticed from him and the people from his era is the vocational attitude towards their job. And today I don't see that. Because if there is that vocation, if people really understand, for example, teachers, if they understand what they are actually doing, because the life or the future of society is actually in their hands, and they feel that vocation, that those groups will not emerge in the schools like you're talking about. I don't think so.
Yeah. One thing also is there is the population of the students in the school compared to the number of teachers that has been employed to teach. It's the teachers are minimal. They don't have enough they don't have enough teachers to control the school, right? So I just heard that when this new present government that came in BC has increased the number of teachers in the school. And this has been a war with the teachers. They've been in strike for years and years, but the government don't want to pay too much, right? Maybe because he thinks that one teacher can teach the whole school. They really don't put too much attention to that. So if we have the resources, to combat these gangs and all this in school, I think it will solve some of the problems. But we don't have it. And as you say, we have money. Canada has money to do everything. Like me, when my kids were in school, because I see the public school has a lot of problems, I didn't want to put my kids into public school. I went into a private school where I have to pay school fees to bring my kids up. But not all the parents, not all of us have the opportunity to pay the private school, So I don't know how we can work on that aspect.
You was talking about the structural aspect of all this. You have to remember in a society like this where you go to school where you live. That is the structural dynamics of it. Okay, so it's not like you can just, okay, this is a nice, beautiful school, I will go there. You live in an environment, if you're a poor person, the tax base of that environment is so poor, and you depend on that resource in that base, because you cannot cross the boundary from here to there. So that you are trapped in that environment. If you want to cross it, it demands a lot more maneuvering here and there. So these are all part of the structures within which you have to operate. Okay, beyond that, I mean, Samuel was talking about how at times you don't have to blame racism for all those things. That is a very important point. At times we take that to be too far. There is a lot to be said about parental input. I mean, there is a research that was done recently that was counter-arguing against the fact that the blacks are saying that the schools are not looking after them. But the point they were trying to make is that mostly the difference is what goes on at the home level, at the home. So if they are all at home and the resources are the same, the black does the same. In other words, the school seems to be equalizing. But when they come home, I will go home and my children will have books, they have this, they have books. Other people's home, there's no book, there's nothing there. So that child, during the holidays, is when they get way behind, okay? But they try to catch up when school comes. But during the holidays, the wealthy ones are in activities in schools, in libraries, and these ones, and the poor ones are situations where the mom is working, you know, those activities. It is at the home that the children normally lag behind, not at the school. I'm not saying the schools are equal, but we have to also pay attention to what goes on at the home.
Yes. Another question. Actually, both topics seem to be merged. They're very parallel because they are all on social things. But so my question to both of you guys, in your books, do you have, because empirical facts will be very important to illustrate your points. Do you have any research done where you have the results of those researches to back things up?
Mostly in this area of research, you see, what happens is, as people of color or black scholars, racialized peer scholars, when you say most of these things, they will, others who want to go against you will say, okay, we've heard all this before. So normally the best approach is to use data that you can collect from, say, the people themselves, black people themselves, and also add data from government sources, most likely from, say, Statistics Canada. So if Statistics Canada compile data set and say that the income of black is 60% that of white, that is remains something that people will not dispute because it's not you making the data up. So most of these research, what we do is compile data from organized government sources, whereby we can talk about the income differentials. Very often in such comparison, what you have to keep in mind is that if I want to compare the income of black or white, I just don't compare the income. I have to keep some variables constant. So I would say if this black person is at this age, with this education, with this experience, with this living in this province, and you have a comparable white person, what is the income? And in most cases, what you find is with the same characteristics, the black will lag behind the white. And this will be coming from the government records. So it's not only what we have people like ourselves saying in terms of our own lived experiences, but also what we can back up from the government documentation, which remains very difficult to dispute against. So mostly we combine what we call the quantitative and the qualitative data to make this type of points.
I, for example, relied on Stats Canada, the difference between native Canadians, African Canadians, and then mainstream Canadians, to argue my case that, as he said, if we keep certain variables constant, okay, and we look at the differentials, we have to eliminate things like, well, let's eliminate, gender, or let's eliminate racism, okay? Let's forget, it's not racism that is causing the differentials. Let's look at the level of education, okay, of the typical, black person and the typical white person. The typical, the level of this household income, right? And C, eliminate racism, stereotype, and then what is left? How do you explain the differentials? This person has the same level of education, experience, has been working for all these years, has 3 children, a wife, okay, and the other person, that white person, has the same thing. And yet, at the end of the day, the white person's income and prosperity is way over there. So what explains that? What explains that?
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm a bit late, but I will pick certain things that we're talking about. My name is Joe. It kind of worries me that this attitude of always calling on racism
Yeah.
is a bit of we're hiding under
Yeah.
something that's not too prevalent.
Yeah.
We are, of course, Africans, asked about our internal reorganization to confront issues that are bothering us.
Yeah.
I closed on Burnaby and I was racing down because I kind of find value in this book
Yeah.
launch.
Yeah.
And I told the hall I'm going to meet is going to be very big,
Yeah.
and this hall will be filled up with Africans. And I'm kind of disappointed. What is the problem? We Africans should begin to ask questions.
Yeah.
Why are we so aversive to intellectual racism?
Yeah.
No, it's book launch. Everyone that hears that, oh, book launch, come on. If you had put there would be music and food and dance, this place would be packed. I wonder why you didn't do that though.
That is a good, yeah, that's a good question.
We are so aversive to intellectual reasoning. I don't know if it is in our DNA.
Yeah.
We are blaming. We came to this country. I mean, let us give the white book a lot of credit.
Excuse me, speak for yourself.
Oh, no, that's okay. He's
That's
just,
okay.
he's
Speak for
He
yourself.
can bring his mic.
No, that's
Yeah,
okay.
Let him finish.
Yeah.
Please let him finish.
Let's finish.
Yeah, we can. In order for growth, we can tolerate issues like that.
Yeah.
So rather than let us give credit to the white people, because if we were in the shoes of the white, it would be worse. So what I'm trying to say, rather than blame the outside forces, let us begin to see how we can reorganize ourselves so that we can confront issues like this. Let us stop blaming our woes on racism, nepotism. No. What have we done for ourselves? I go to every African event, especially when it has to do with intellectual issues, it's zero. But when it has to do with dancing and eating, it's packed. Raise any issue, what people have to come and think. Look at, I've not met you before. I know that Dr. Chris very well. But, the man has been very prominent in an African community, especially the Ghanaian community. But when issues like this that is launching a book, I expect this place to be packed. And now we're talking to a few heads here about confronting racism. And is that the way we do? Of course, all of us know here that politics is about numbers and pressure. Is this what we used to confront? So let's talk to ourselves. Let's go in our inner self to begin to re-engineer what we call social reformation. Thank you.
It's a good point, however, before you come. However, we have to remember that racism plays a big role as well. And the whole thing is dialectical. Okay? Our agency and lack, and our ability to exercise our agency, and then the social structures that impinge on our agency. I agree with you that our people don't seem to be dabbling, they don't seem to be interested in intellectual, things like this. But many times when we organize things, I hear people saying, "Oh, we don't want any long talk. We want to dance. So it's difficult even to, organize events and have people to come and engage in intellectual exchange. They just want to go onto the floor and dance. When people are talking, say, "Oh, you are talking too long. Book long. Are you reading your dissertation?" Things like that. They just want to go, and it's a very serious deficiency in our communities. And we need to be addressing this, head on.
Maybe that would be the next book for you guys.
That is correct. That's right. Yes.
I was just going to say, in your books, did you actually try to explain or find reason why racism? Like, I'm just basing it, like backing him up as what he was saying. So, is there anything in your book saying why racism, or how it started? What causes it? What are the people of black or of color doing that should not be done? To lessen all these problems. I.e., like, one example is what he is saying, and there's so many other examples that we people of color do that can annoy, or people, and those people are probably not racist, but they will react and bring out all these rules and things because they are not happy about how people of color are behaving or doing. I want to see something in that book telling us that don't do this, don't do that, and then that might bring down, racism. Like I'm a nurse, and we are trying to raise funds to help hospitals in Ghana. And I was trying to, we do, all the events we do for fundraising is just dancing and eating, like he's saying. So I was trying to invite my colleagues at work to come to the event. And then one of the nurses said, that is very good what you are doing to help your country, but I went to South Africa to volunteer as a nurse. And then we went and bought them some stuff in there, like hospital equipment. And then they went back there in a week, or I can't remember how long after they went there. None of those equipment was there. It was all stolen. So why should she come and donate, and how sure am I that that thing, the equipment or the money that she has given is going to help, restore, hospitals in Ghana. So that's one thing we do. And we, like at an event, we are always late to go to a meeting or at work. The employer obviously will not want to employ a black person or a Ghanaian because you're always late to work. Why would I employ you? Things like that. We have to look at ourselves, do a self-search, and try and do better.
Okay, very good. I want to make this observation. Deviance, misbehavior is not
a black thing.
Is a black thing. It cuts across races. It's because we are not in there, so we don't see. We are looking in from outside. Sometimes you say, oh, these people are united, the Chinese are united. But go inside and see, they also have their divisions. This is how we have it. But if we try to make it a black thing, then we are racializing the thing. Crime is a crime. It is when you label it as crime of a particular group, then you are racializing it. And many of the things that they label blacks and other groups with is simply racialization. They just create it. They put the label on it. When you steal, is stealing, all right? But if you say that it's black stealing, it means that only blacks have that proclivity. Meanwhile, every race has its fair share of thieves. But because we don't have the power, we don't control the media, the knowledge industry, we can't counter. We don't win. When they describe these things, we can't come out to say that there's not true. Your people also do the same thing. We can't do that. So they keep reinforcing it again and again and again, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We tell ourselves, oh, we are deviant, we are thieves. We buy into that dominant narrative. That is
talking about the power and knowledge, there's this author by the name of Michel Foucault. Basically, his basic work deals with the relationship between power and knowledge. For the most part, we talk about how knowledge is power. And Foucault is turning it around to say that power is knowledge. That is to say that those who have the power are those who create what becomes knowledge. So knowledge is power, and power is knowledge. How often have you heard them talking about the so-called white-collar crime? Somebody can rape up the whole society for billions of dollars. You will not go to jail because it's supposedly white-collar crime. You pick something from a cigarette, $10, you're already in jail. So there is a lot of built-in power hierarchy in it. So they control some of these things. But nonetheless, we have to be mindful of the fact that we admit our own shortcomings. Just like they have shortcomings, but they don't portray it. But, I mean, human beings at the core is one human race. There is not much difference between what is black, what is white, what is, of course, depends on environment and all that.
Yeah.
Remember this, most of African countries have been independent, maximum 60 years. We've been controlled, the slave trade alone took the most of our able-bodied males, about 50 million of them, from our continent to a different place. Okay? Just look at the devastation that will cause. For years and centuries and all those things, and we were dominated by colonialism. Okay? Now, in the 60s to this time, we are independent. How long ago is that? Maximum 60, 70 years. How long did it take America to become? So some of these dynamics, you think like, oh, we are not there, but the destabilization, some of which is psychological, inferiority complex built into it that you don't even feel like you are wrong is the worst wrong. They don't do any wrong. When we live in Ghana, we thought about society like this to be more moral than we were, but we are close with them, and we can see whether the morality is different. And indeed, it's not that different. It could even be possibly worse from what they do. So there is a lot of complexity built into that. You see, that is no way trying to absolve ourselves from the lack of intellectual curiosity and all this. I've talked about this in so many different contexts. You go to places like airport, everybody's holding a book, except when you go to the part that is going to Africa, also nobody cares about anything. Nobody's reading. Okay? Obama get up, you establish a national library for Obama, Bush Library. Have you heard about any African president getting up and establish library? We don't even have a national library. You go to university, they don't buy books. It's not a premium. You don't place any emphasis on intellectual work. We don't care. You carry books to back home or airport, they open it, nobody's going to bother you. That's what I do when I'm going to put the books on top. They open it and then they are passed through because nobody want to bother me. You see, so we don't have that intellectual mindset. There's no two ways about that. And that you can trace it way back to the power that be and how our mindset was. So we have to turn things around. That is the point.
Yeah. We are not powerless. We have agency, and we need to exercise that agency to challenge the system, to empower ourselves. It's difficult, but that does not mean that we should just resign. We should keep challenging, attacking the system, questioning the system, and when we keep doing that, nobody thought that the civil rights, segregation in the U.S. would ever happen. But it did happen. Desegregation happened because years of struggle, demonstrations, passive resistance, everything accumulated in the ending of segregation in the USA. Nobody thought the slave trade would ever end, right? But it ended. For many white American slaveholders, it was the normal thing. It was going to be there forever. But thanks to struggles, resistance, over the years, centuries, it ended. Of course, we still have new forms of slavery here, but through struggles, constant struggle, challenging, questioning, critically, attacking the system, things can change. So we shouldn't give up.
I'm keen on what our sister had to say.
But no, it's sometimes it's just like even our fellow blacks, they will think that whatever is happening to you is a fault. I don't understand it. Patrick went through summer at Fraser University. How many times did you have to appeal your grade? He is here. Ask him. He's one of the brilliant boys. For you to come to Africa and go straight to university, you have to be cream of the crop. You finish you did well in an exam. And you prof, sometimes they don't even read it. Just look at the name.
Let me give you a good example of research that is done.
Ask him here, he's sitting here.
Recently they did a research, you can Google it, they call it whitening the resume.
Impress you.
My sister, I'm just adding to your point. Whitening the resume done by some U of T profs. They did an experiment whereby the resume of students that were sent out, they try to whiten it. So if you have a name that sounds like an African, they change it. If it sounds like Indian, they change it. So the first one that went with the African, if you have an African student organization, obviously that they can identify without you being there, they know that you are a black person. Or if you are Indian student this or some Shinkonton, they know you are Chinese. So they whiten their resume. And experimentally, they were able to find out that when you whiten their resume, the same qualification and everything, the moment you take away the ethnic variables, the person gets called for interviews. And that's just an experiment that was conducted. Okay. So the racism, you can try to say, don't buy into it. It is really there, but the point is you have to know it's there and work harder to overcome it. That's the point. It's really there.
I have one example.
Yeah.
Because I have a friend at work,
Yeah.
right? And usually when there's postings,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when the job is available,
Yeah.
they post it internal,
Yeah.
right? Before it go
That's what
outside.
yeah.
Yes. So the internal postings comes in, and then if you are there, you can apply.
Yeah.
And then what it is when the internal posting and somebody who is qualified for the job, you don't have to give it to outside.
Outside, yeah.
Okay, the internal one has to get it before an outside. So I just recently at my work, there was a job posted internal. And then the my friend applied for the posting because she loved that job. And then instead, somebody from outside also applied for that same posting, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because it should go inside before it goes outside.
Mhm.
But instead, this girl from nowhere applied for the posting, and it was internal posting. So then, when the interview came, they called her for the interview first, before my other friend. Okay? And then what it is my friend was very upset. Why is it that I qualified for this job? This person is not working for PHSA or whatever it is, but you have allowed her to apply for the posting, and now you have called her for interview first before me. So this is really discrimination there because of my color, because I think I'm black. That's why this is going on. And for sure, they were going to give the job to her, right?
Mm.
And so when she saw that she followed, she said, no, I'm not going to let this happen. So I'm going to go to my union. And then she tried to pass through the union. The union was trying to, the manager says, you didn't pass the interview because she passed the interview. That's not the right. That's not it. So then she went to Women Result. He went to Women Rights or something. And then they called the management, they called her, and she went. And then the union requested for the interview, the marks and everything. She passed the interview.
Mm-hmm.
She passed everything. But then, why are they going to give the job to outsider before her? So now the case is still pending, right? And then my employers see that they are wrong. They want to bribe her with $1,000 to let the case go.
Yes.
She said, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm fighting to the end. Yeah. So this is it. Yeah, this is.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The world is not fair.
Yeah.
Let's recognize that. Two, racism, nepotism, division is endemic in human body.
Yeah.
I'm from Nigeria. Go to Nigeria. There's accusations, counter-accusation from different ethnic groups.
Oh, yeah.
Racist language. Ghana, between Away and Akans. They said, when we go to Africa, a South African and a Nigerian or Zimbabwe, they look down on somebody. It's the same. So, what I'm trying to say, you cannot have these rights on a platter of gold.
Yeah.
If you don't have a unified front, there's no way we'll be here and our children will be our part will be better than our children if we just sit down and look.
That is true.
Look at history. Every form of racism, every form of segregation have been confronted. If it's not confronted, it sits with us.
Yeah.
So That's what I'm saying, just like you said. If we don't form a unified front, if we don't form a group with numbers, I followed politics here, politicians.
Before you come in, to illustrate, give a personal example of how one can face racism. You know, when I was, I had just come to Canada, I came to the University of Windsor as a visiting scholar, okay? And then the next year, there was an opening. So I applied, and I went for the interview, and then I was rejected. I was in my office when I heard one of my colleagues, very mad. He came and knocked at my door. He said, these are the people who claim they are social justice advocates.
Yeah.
And because they claim that you don't have the job experience, they're not going to hire you. And I told them, how would he get the experience if you don't hire him? So I am going to protest. And I want you to write to the chair of the department to, schedule another interview. And this was done. And I got the job. Somebody, a colleague, because I went to his class multiple times as a guest lecturer, and he saw how I could teach. So he didn't understand why they used lack of experience against me. And that is what happens. Most of the jobs that are posted, before they post them, they are already networked, fill the positions. And the networking who are there is their own people. So how are you going to, you won't win.
It makes us always down. So
Exactly.
you
Yes.
have to.
Yes.
So I just want to say something. I just want to say something. I know really, but she was saying something about the way based on my experience in Canada and as an employer, I have, apart from my music, I have another 6 people who work with me. And one day, one guy, he always looked mad. And I asked him, why are you always mad? He looked at me, he just looked at me as nothing. I called him. I said, what's the problem? Are you okay? And he said, yeah, that is okay. But he's mad. It's not because he's mad at me, he's mad at himself.
Yeah.
Then I stopped, this guy can work very well. And I said, why are you mad at yourself? He said, every time I see you, I still believe you are working for me. And I am the boss.
Yeah.
I'm the employee. I employed him.
Yeah.
He's telling me that he always feel like I'm working for him. I've never heard it.
Yes.
What? You think I'm working for you? He said, yeah. I said, how did you arrive there? He said, because he doesn't even understand, but he feels that way.
Yeah.
See, the way you can understand the white people, you have to be close to them, you have to work with them.
Yeah.
They don't even know subconsciously that they are doing something out of, because they grow like that. The mentality is you always want to be first.
Yeah.
These other people are
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
I keep telling most of the people that will call ourselves black, the word black is not even good for us to call ourselves black.
Yeah.
The word black is used by the Arabs as slaves.
Yeah.
And I said, you kind of shocked. And the guy was crying. He said, I'm sorry, but I have to let you know. And I started talking with him. He said, I asked him, I said, what do you think we Africans should think? He said, we should always talk about where we came from, who we are, tell our story. People, most of them, they don't understand. They feel like they are the superior. They feel like we that came from Africa, we all live in huts. Even in this day and age, they still believe we all like poor, wretched people who doesn't even know how to speak English. Sometimes they are surprised that we speak English.
Yeah.
So they are surprised that you're a professor.
Yeah.
So all those things are in their system. Subconsciously, they can't even help it.
Yeah.
It's called subliminal racism.
You can't even, it's so already in their blood. So to me, it's really deep. And since then, I talk to them in broken English, in pidgin English. I don't speak English anymore. I say English is vernacular to me.
I said, if you want to learn my language, I pay money to learn English. If you want to learn my pidgin English, pay me, I'll teach you.
Very good. Yes, our brother at the back, yes.
I think there was a message from this lady about donation.
Yeah.
And my brother here has been giving us some ideas about how to confront most of these racial issues. And what's your name?
Julie.
Julie was talking about that lady. I remember some years ago when the Ethiopian Eritrean family came, and I was approached by one of these NGOs to donate, and I said no. And he asked me, don't you care, you are from Africa, don't you care? And I said, I care, but I'm not gonna give you. And then he started comforting me. I said, okay, sit now, let's debate this. Russia is backing the other side. The American is backing the other side. And all the money that goes into that donation, who knows they are going to use to buy bullet or not. Right. And then the guy became interested. Okay, let me explain to you. And he did. And then I said, well, I care. But not until I see the person who's collecting the money. And not until I see where the money is going to and what it's going to be used for.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pay for that. And I think similarly, this is the message my brother is giving. Yeah. That disagreement, the heart of disagreement in our politics is very good. Very, very good. And we should be able to sit down and talk. And that's why he was saying that this is the time for intellectual discourse. And whether the people, but if it were party, they will come. Right.
All right, thank you very much. Before we round up, the books are here. Mine is only $42, okay? And Joseph's is $38. Yeah. All right. So if you are interested in purchasing, please feel free to do so. My cashier. Okay. Our cashier. And then there is food for us. Before we go, there is food and drinks. So let us help ourselves. Any further questions? Any further discussions? Okay.
Do you have it as an ebook?
No, there is no ebook, but you can order it from the publisher, and I have the information here, and then you get a discount. If you code, there is a code here. Yeah, so you're on your way.
For Media International, you wrote a book. We're here for this book, Boomerang Ethics: How Racism Affects Us All. Yeah. I guess you are a professor. Yeah.
My name is Joseph Mensah. I teach at York University in Toronto. I'm actually the chair of Geography Department at York.
Okay. Yeah. What informed your decision to write this?
Well, this is a book that is a follow-up to a book I wrote earlier on Black Canadians. Mm-hmm. And basically as a follow-up to tell people about the extent to which the racism that often they think they are doing to blacks turn around and come and affect them. So basically that is why I use the metaphor of a boomerang. You throw it and then it comes back. Yeah.
With the recent upheaval, especially across the border, yeah. Making a comparative analysis of racism, do you think we should confront it, racism as it is in Canada, and nip it in the bud before it gets across the border to us?
Yeah, it all depends. You see, those of us who study racism at the core, the essence will not be that much different. Mostly the US one becomes very conspicuous. You see it a lot. But don't fool yourself. It is a bit subtle, but yet consequential in Canada also. It may not be as blatant as you can see it, but many of us who live here will tell you that it is there behind the scenes.
If you agree it's endemic in Canada, how do we confront that?
How you confront it through some of these type of discussions, through policies, because mostly it comes to the realm of competition for jobs and all those things. As you have, some of the panel members were talking about, they will make this type of claims, but to what extent is the government prepared to put in policies? Are the policies enforced to back it up, or they just have employment equity with no teeth to bite when you breach the equity rules? So those are, in fact, there has to be policies available, which indeed they are, but are they being enforced? So those are some of the advocacy we have to do.
Some of the panel members here were of the opinion that racism, if it's not confronted, cannot be defeated.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
Confronted and defeated, of course, first and foremost, you have to realize it's there. You have to identify it. Otherwise, if you can't identify it, there's no way you're going to fight it. So generally, I do not want that type of high political confrontational things. But mostly as an intellectual, I use brain power to discuss and show people what it is that they are doing to themselves, then they may not even see it. Yeah.
The first person that hears about racism is the picture they paint is that the victim perhaps may be the minority, which two of us belong to.
Yeah.
But what are the weapons that minorities should use to confront racism?
Mostly you have to, there are so many things. I personally, as a minority, I really don't want to feed into anybody's stereotype. For instance, if I go in an employment place, I will never be late to any meeting, because you give them the chance to say that they expect you to be late, and you are always late. Okay, you live up to call, you do your work competently. For the most part, there is built-in fear of competition. Okay, because that's why racism is very high in the labor market, because we are all trying to survive for livelihood. So it's not necessarily the fact that the black is this or the black is lazy or this. They are using it against you to get ahead in the labor market. So it's the fear of competition. That's how they are putting somebody else down. So if you are down, then they should be up. Okay, if you are lazy, then maybe presumably they are better off, hardworking, so they should get a job. So built into this is some fear of competition. So you have to know all those dynamics, and so that you become strong in the way you combat it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Mensah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
With me here is Dr. Quist-Adade, a professor of sociology in Kwantlen Polytechnic University, Surrey, British Columbia. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that fact that you launch of your local launch of your book, From Local to the Global, Just Theories and Key Issues in Global Justice. And looking at this, it's like you are addressing how we can get justice in the system from the local to the global.
That's right.
But some of us, the panelists, have just said something which is crucial, that the world is not fair. And if the world is not fair, how can we have global justice?
Yes. The thing is that, yes, the world is not fair, but that unfairness is not natural, it's not biological, it's not genetic. That unfairness, that injustice is human creation. And humans can also uncreate it. So the way to address the problem is we recognizing that this issue of injustice is our creation, and we can create it. We can uncreate it. We can solve it. And that requires collective effort, both locally and globally.
You just mentioned something crucial, collective effort.
Yes.
And to confront injustice and in order for us to get social justice.
Yes.
Relating that to where we live, well, of course, you and I, looking at the camera, we belong to the minority group.
Yes.
How can minorities spring up to confront the injustice in the system?
Again, it requires collective efforts on the part of minorities. They have agency as individuals and as a collective. And as a result, it's only when they exercise that agency consistently and persistently that they can hope, to, break down the system. Because, look, it took only a handful of people through history to change the world. So, yes, individuals can do it, but the collective can do it even better. So again, we need to get together all the time collectively and, reinforce, challenge, disrupt the system. They will listen. Eventually, they will listen.
So, this book, are they available locally or where? Books in chapters or books?
The book can be ordered online.
Okay.
Yeah, so you just simply Google my name and Sense Publishing,
Okay.
and the book will pop up, and then you simply order it. If you want to get a discount, there is a code, all right? You can talk to or email the publisher, and they will give you the code, they will give you a discount.
Okay.
The book is $42, but if you have the code, it's going to be $5 less.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay.